The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched wider than any cathedral built by human hands. Its walls glowed with soft blue light, and holographic displays floated in the air showing thousands of worlds connected by trade routes and treaties. Representatives from 200 species sat in curved rows, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some breathed methane through tubes, others floated in gravity fields. A few existed only as patterns of light. Ambassador Marcus Chen stood at the speaker's platform, his simple gray suit looking plain compared to the jeweled armor and flowing robes around him. He was a short man with graying hair and tired eyes. He had been Earth's representative for 12 years now, and every day felt longer than the last. The Vrex Dominion has now occupied 17 systems in the past 6 months, Chen said, his voice steady but firm. They have ignored every treaty. They have dismissed every warning. If the Council does not act, more innocent lives will be lost. A sound like bubbling water came from the Aquelian delegate's tank. It translated through the universal communicator as laughter. The human speaks of action, the Aquelian said. But what can humanity offer? Your species has been part of this council for 200 years, yet you maintain barely 300 ships. Your military spending is less than most pleasure cruise corporations. More laughter rippled through the chamber. Chen felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face neutral. This was not the first time his people had been mocked here. The Vrex delegate rose from his seat. Commander Thrax stood nearly 3 meters tall. His forearms crossed over his armored chest. His face resembled an earth lizard, but his eyes held cold intelligence. The Dominion takes what is owed to us, Thrax hissed. We are a warrior race. The strong survive. The weak serve. This is natural law, Chen replied. Or tyranny dressed in philosophy. Thrax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. You humans speak much of peace and law. You write poetry. You paint pictures. You send musicians to perform at cultural festivals. Tell me, Ambassador Chen, when was the last time a human fired a weapon in anger? Your people are gardeners, not warriors. The galaxy knows this. Chen looked directly at the Vrex commander. For just a moment, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Something old and terrible. But it passed quickly, and he simply said, We choose peace because we understand war. You choose peace because you are weak, Thrax replied. This council is weak. The Dominion will continue to expand, and there is nothing you can do to stop us. The council session ended with no resolution, as Chen had known it would. He walked through the gleaming corridors of the council station, passing species from across the galaxy. A Xanthari merchant nodded politely. A group of Pelian students stared at him with their many eyes. Everywhere he went, Chen felt the weight of their assumptions. Humans were soft. Humans were naive. Humans had forgotten how to fight. If only they knew the truth. That night, Chen sat alone in his quarters and opened an encrypted channel to Earth. The connection took several minutes to establish, routing through relay stations and security protocols that most species did not even know existed. A woman's face appeared on the screen. Admiral Sarah Torres looked like she could be Chen's sister, with the same dark hair touched with gray, the same lines around her eyes. But where Chen's expression was diplomatic and measured, Torres had the hard gaze of someone who had made difficult choices. They laughed at me again today, Chen said. Good, Torres replied. Let them laugh. Let them feel safe. Thrax is going to make a move against Earth, I can feel it. He sees us as an easy target. Torres nodded slowly. Our intelligence confirms it. Vrex fleet movements suggest they're preparing for a major operation. They've been pulling ships from border patrols and consolidating near the Sol system. How long do we have? A month, maybe less. Torres leaned forward, her face grave. Marcus, if they attack, you know what happens next. Chen closed his eyes. 217 years. That's how long we've kept the protocols sealed. We made a choice as a species, Torres said. After the final war, after we almost destroyed ourselves, we decided to be better. We hid what we were capable of. We showed the galaxy only peace and art and culture. We gave ourselves time to heal. But the scars are still there, Chen whispered. They'll always be there. The question is whether we let those scars make us monsters again, or whether we use what we learned. Torres's voice softened slightly. The containment protocols exist for a reason, Marcus. If Earth is threatened, if our people are in danger, then we do what we must. But we do it with control, with purpose, Never again like before. Chen remembered the history lessons every human child learned. The final war of 2087, when nuclear fire had scorched continents and biological weapons had turned entire regions into dead zones. The darkness that followed when barely 1 billion humans survived. The centuries of rebuilding, of learning, of choosing a different path. But the weapons had not been destroyed. The knowledge had not been forgotten. It had been sealed away, locked behind protocols that required authorization from every human government simultaneously. The memorial arsenals, they were called. Reminders of what humanity could become if they ever forgot the price of hatred. I hope it doesn't come to that, Chen said. So do I, Torres replied. But hope isn't a strategy. I'm bringing the Containment Council together tomorrow. If Thrax is stupid enough to attack, we'll be ready. The call ended, leaving Chen alone with his thoughts. He walked to the window of his quarters and looked out at the stars. Earth was out there somewhere, a small blue world that the galaxy considered insignificant. The birthplace of poets and dreamers, they said. A planet of philosophers who had given up their violent past. Chen touched the glass, leaving a fingerprint. They have no idea what we survived, he said to the empty room. What we learned. What we became. Across the galaxy, on a dozen human colonies and outposts, similar conversations were taking place. On Luna Base, beneath the gray dust of Earth's moon, maintenance crews began running diagnostics on systems that had been dormant for centuries. On Mars Station, engineers checked seals on underground facilities that official records claimed were archaeological sites. In the asteroid belt, mining ships that looked like commercial vessels activated hidden weapon systems. The human defense network was vast and ancient, built in the years after the final war when humanity had sworn two things: never to wage war for conquest, but always to be prepared to defend themselves. Every generation since had maintained the containment protocols, hoping they would never be needed but ensuring they remained ready. 3 weeks later, Chen was awakened by an emergency alert. His communicator screamed with priority messages. He activated the display and felt his blood run cold. The Vrex Dominion had assembled a fleet of 3,000 warships at the edge of the Sol system. It was the largest military force humanity had seen since joining the galactic community. Against Earth's official defense fleet of 300 ceremonial vessels, it seemed impossibly overwhelming. Chen dressed quickly and opened the encrypted channel to Earth. Torres was already on screen, surrounded by military personnel in the command center deep beneath the Rockies. They're here, Chen said unnecessarily. We see them, Torres replied. Thrax is broadcasting on all frequencies. He's demanding Earth's immediate surrender and access to our resources. He's giving us 12 hours. Can we stop them? Torres looked at someone off screen, then back at Chen. The Containment Council has voted. 7 billion people, one decision. The protocols are unlocked, Marcus. For the first time in 217 years, humanity is going to war. Chen felt something twist in his stomach. Relief and dread mixed together. God help us all. God help them, Torres corrected. They have no idea what they've done. The morning sun cast long shadows across the United Earth Assembly building in Geneva when the sky began to change. It started as a shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement, except this shimmer was 30,000 kilometers above the planet's surface. Then the shimmer tore open, and something massive pushed through. The Concordat diplomatic vessel was unlike anything humanity had built. It stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its surface gleaming with metals that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Elegant curves and sweeping arcs made it look more like a work of art than a spaceship. Within minutes, every news channel on Earth was broadcasting images of the alien vessel. People stopped on sidewalks, staring up at screens. Children pointed at the sky, though the ship was far too distant to see with the naked eye. President Sarah Chen received the first communication 17 minutes after the vessel's arrival. She was in her office, having just finished her morning briefing with the Security Council, when her assistant rushed in with a tablet. The message was in perfect English, though it carried an odd formality that suggested machine translation. Greetings to the people of Earth. We are the Galactic Concordat, representatives of 7 species who maintain peace and order in this region of space. We come with an offer of friendship and protection. We request an audience with your leaders at your earliest convenience. Sarah read the message 3 times. She had been president for 6 years. Long enough to develop good instincts about people and their intentions. Something about the tone bothered her, though she could not immediately identify what. She called for an emergency cabinet meeting. The aliens requested to meet within 48 hours. Sarah agreed, but she also made several calls to people whose opinions she trusted. One of those calls went to General Marcus Steele, the commander of Earth's Unified Defense Command. Another went to Dr. Yuki Tanaka, head of the Intelligence Analysis Division. Marcus was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with gray hair cut military short and eyes that missed nothing. He had fought in the resource wars of the 2090s and had spent the last 2 decades preparing Earth's defenses for the day when humanity encountered other intelligent life. That day had apparently arrived. "What do you think?" Sarah asked him over a secure video link. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "I think anyone who leads with protection is usually selling something you don't need. But we'll play nice and see what they want." Dr. Tanaka was more direct. "The message structure suggests a hierarchical culture with rigid social protocols. The word protection appears 3 times in a 4-sentence message. That's not accidental. They're framing the conversation before it begins." Sarah nodded slowly. "Keep analyzing everything they send us. And Marcus, I want our orbital assets on standby."
"Quiet, standby."
"Let's not spook our guests, but let's not be caught sleeping either." The day of the meeting arrived with unseasonably clear skies. The Concordat sent down a shuttle, smaller than their main vessel but still impressive, covered in the same color-shifting metal. It landed on the designated pad outside Geneva, and 7 figures emerged. They were humanoid, which surprised everyone watching. 2 legs, 2 arms, a head with sensory organs arranged in familiar patterns. But there the similarities ended. Ambassador Velthor, who led the delegation, stood over 2 meters tall. His skin was a deep blue purple and his eyes were large and golden, with no visible pupils. He wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid light, constantly flowing and changing. The other 6 delegates represented different species. One looked almost human except for the crystalline formations growing from her shoulders. Another was covered in fine scales that created rainbow patterns when he moved. A third had 4 arms and moved with an unsettling grace. They were beautiful and alien and deliberately impressive. Sarah met them in the main assembly hall, flanked by her cabinet and 100 representatives from every nation on Earth. The room had been built to accommodate 5,000 people, and every seat was filled. Cameras broadcast the meeting to billions of viewers worldwide. Velthor bowed, a gesture that somehow conveyed both respect and condescension. When he spoke, his voice was deep and melodious, translated in real time by devices the aliens had provided. "People of Earth, we welcome you to the community of spacefaring civilizations. Your recent achievements in faster-than-light travel have brought you to our attention. We come today with an offer that we have extended to many species throughout the galaxy." He paused for effect, his golden eyes sweeping across the assembled humans. "The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are hostile species, natural phenomena that can destroy entire worlds, and countless other threats. The Galactic Concordat was formed 3,000 years ago to protect developing civilizations from these dangers. We offer you the same protection we provide to 47 other species." Velthor activated a holographic display that floated above the assembly floor. It showed a map of the galaxy with dozens of star systems highlighted in green. "These are the worlds under Concordat protection. They thrive in safety, free from the terrors that plague unprotected systems. Their citizens live in peace knowing that our fleets guard their skies. Their governments focus on art, science, and philosophy rather than weapons and war." The ambassador walked slowly around the holographic display, his robes trailing behind him. "We offer Earth this same security. In exchange, we ask only for cooperation. You would grant us the right to maintain defensive installations in your system. You would share your resources to support the Concordat fleet. You would submit to our guidance in matters of interstellar relations and military development. In return, you would gain access to our technology, our markets, and most importantly, our protection." Sarah watched the display, her face carefully neutral. Around her, she could feel the tension in the room. Some representatives leaned forward eagerly. Others frowned, clearly skeptical. "What level of autonomy would Earth retain?" she asked. Velthor smiled, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. "You would govern your internal affairs as you see fit. However, all external matters, trade, defense, exploration, would be coordinated through the Concordat to ensure your safety and the safety of others." And if we decline this offer? The smile faded slightly. That would be unfortunate. Species who refuse concordate protection often face difficult challenges. The galaxy can be harsh to those who stand alone. We would, of course, respect your decision, but we would also be unable to intervene if you encountered troubles beyond your capability to handle. It was smoothly delivered, but Sarah heard the threat underneath. Accept our protection or face the consequences alone. We appreciate your generous offer, Ambassador Velthor, she said, keeping her voice warm and diplomatic. Such an important decision requires careful consideration. We request 48 hours to discuss this with our people and provide you with our answer. Velthor's expression suggested he had expected immediate acceptance. His golden eyes narrowed slightly. Of course. Take the time you need. We will await your response aboard our vessel. The aliens departed with the same ceremony with which they had arrived. As soon as they were gone, Sarah called an emergency session with her inner circle. They met in a secure room 3 stories below the assembly building, where no signals could enter or leave. Thoughts? Sarah asked, looking around the table. Marcus spoke first. That was a protection racket dressed up in diplomatic language. Nice planet you've got here, shame if something happened to it. Agreed, said Dr. Tanaka, pulling up data on her tablet. I've been analyzing the 47 systems they showed us, cross-referencing with our astronomical databases and historical records. Every single one was contacted shortly after achieving faster-than-light capability, just like us. Every single one accepted concordate protection within days. What happened to species who refused? Asked Defense Minister Chen Wei. Yuki's expression darkened. That's the interesting part. I found references to 6 species who initially declined. 3 eventually accepted after experiencing mysterious attacks from unknown raiders. 2 went silent. Their systems are now listed as uninhabited. 1 was declared a rogue civilization and subjected to pacification. The records on that are vague, but the implication is clear. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. So this is conquest with extra steps. Sophisticated conquest, Marcus corrected. They let their victims govern themselves, which reduces resistance. They take resources and autonomy instead of land, and they maintain the fiction that it's all voluntary. Can we fight them? Sarah asked bluntly. Marcus smiled, and there was no humor in it. Madam President, they have no idea who they're dealing with. Over the next 48 hours, Earth's leadership worked around the clock. They analyzed every second of the alien transmission, every word Velthor had spoken, every detail visible in their holographic displays. The intelligence division hacked into the Concordate ship's communication systems, a feat made easier by alien overconfidence in their security. What they learned was illuminating. The Concordate had never fought a peer military power. Their standard procedure was simple. Appear impressive, make the offer, and apply pressure if needed. Most species capitulated immediately, overawed by the aliens' technology and fearful of standing alone. For species who resisted, the Concordat had a fleet of mercenary raiders who would attack until the target accepted protection. But the Concordat had never encountered a species like humanity. They had studied Earth's broadcasts and internet transmissions, but they had focused on entertainment and culture. They knew humans enjoyed something called football and told stories about superheroes. They knew Earth had recently unified under a single government after centuries of conflict. What they had not studied was human military history. They had not read about the Punic Wars or the Mongol conquests. They knew nothing of Thermopylae or Stalingrad. They had not analyzed the tactical innovations of Napoleon or the strategic doctrines of Sun Tzu. They saw that Earth had no massive orbital weapons platforms and concluded that humans were peaceful and unprepared. They could not have been more wrong. Sarah called her final strategy meeting 12 hours before the deadline. Around the table sat Marcus, Yuki, and the heads of every military branch. Also present were representatives from the Mars Colonial Authority, the Europa Research Station, and the Titan Mining Consortium. Show them, Sarah said. Marcus activated the room's holographic display. It showed Earth's solar system, but not as the Concordate had seen it. Red dots appeared throughout the display, hundreds of them, then thousands. Every red dot is a weapons platform, defense station, or military vessel, Marcus explained. Most have been in place for over 50 years, since we first achieved reliable spaceflight. We built them into asteroids, mining stations, research facilities, and communication satellites. We hid them in plain sight because we learned one critical lesson from our own history. He paused, looking around the room. Never show your full strength until absolutely necessary. Sarah stood, walking to the holographic display. She reached out and touched one of the dots representing Luna, Earth's moon. The image expanded, showing the interior of what the Concordat believed was a simple research base. In reality, it was a military fortress with enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Humanity has been preparing for first contact since we first looked at the stars, Sarah said quietly. We hoped for friends. We planned for enemies. We built defenses that would make any aggressor think twice. And we hid all of it because the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have. She turned to face the group. Tomorrow we tell the Concordat our answer, and we show them exactly who they're dealing with. But not all of it. Never all of it. Around the table, smiles appeared. They were not nice smiles. The Concordat was about to learn a hard lesson that every human child knew from history classes. Never underestimate the species that survived its own worst inventions. Ambassador Velthor stood in the observation deck of the Concordat vessel, looking down at the blue-green planet below. Earth was beautiful, he had to admit. The swirling white clouds, the deep oceans, the green and brown continents. It reminded him of Kelvin Prime, his homeworld before industry and progress had covered it in gleaming cities. Behind him, his science officer Tarkin was running deep scans of the planet and its surroundings. The insectoid alien's mandibles clicked together as he worked, a sign of concentration among his people. What do you see? Velthor asked without turning around. Confusion, Ambassador, Tarkin replied. His translated voice carried a chittering undertone. The scans show a civilization that has achieved faster-than-light capability, but their infrastructure does not match this achievement. Velthor turned, his golden eyes focusing on the science officer. Explain. Tarkin brought up a holographic display. It showed Earth's orbital space, dotted with satellites and space stations. Their satellite network is extensive, but most units are commercial or scientific. We detect communication satellites, weather monitoring systems, and research stations. There are no orbital defense platforms of the type we would expect from a militarized civilization. Perhaps they are simply peaceful, suggested Kira Nell, the four-armed tactical officer. She moved to stand beside the display, her multiple hands gesturing at different points. Some species achieve space travel through cooperation rather than competition. Velthor made a sound that might have been a laugh. In 3,000 years, the Concordat has never encountered such a species. Competition drives progress. Conflict breeds innovation. These humans fought among themselves for thousands of years before unifying. Their broadcasts are filled with stories of war and violence. They are not peaceful by nature. Then where are their weapons? Tarkin asked. It was a good question. The Concordat had refined their scanning technology over millennia. They could detect power signatures from weapon systems, identify the energy profiles of shield generators, and spot the unique radiation patterns of military-grade reactors. Earth should have been lighting up their sensors like a supernova. Instead, they saw almost nothing. Perhaps their weapons are primitive, suggested Kira Nell. They may rely on chemical explosives or kinetic weapons that our scanners do not prioritize. Velthor considered this. It made sense. Humans had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their weapons technology might lag behind their propulsion systems. It had happened before with other species. Continue scanning, he ordered. I want a complete analysis of their military capability before they give us their answer. And send observation drones to their colony sites. Let us see what they have built on Mars and these moons they have settled. The drones launched silently, small spheres of advanced technology that could observe without being detected, or so the Concordat believed. On Earth, deep in a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, alarms began to sound. Specialist Jennifer Wu was monitoring her console when the proximity warnings lit up her screen. She was 26 years old, had graduated, top of her class from the Unified Defense Academy, and had been hoping for a quiet night shift. Instead, she was watching alien spy drones enter Earth's space. Commander, we have multiple unidentified objects separating from the Concordat vessel, she reported, keeping her voice level despite the excitement flooding through her. "Count is 7. They're heading toward Mars, Luna, Europa, and Titan." Commander Peterson moved to stand behind her chair. He was an older man with weathered features and calm eyes that had seen too many crises to panic at one more. "Let them look," he said quietly. "They're seeing exactly what we want them to see." On Mars, the observation drone swept over Olympus Mons colony. The settlement sprawled across the base of the massive volcano, home to 30,000 people. The drone's scanners picked up habitation, domes, agricultural facilities, and what appeared to be mining operations. It detected no weapons, no military installations, no hidden defenses. The drone did not recognize that the agricultural facility had walls thick enough to stop armor-piercing rounds. It did not realize that the mining equipment could be repurposed as mass drivers capable of launching projectiles at orbital targets. It missed the fact that every dome had independent life support specifically designed to survive combat conditions. Humans had learned many lessons from their violent history. One of the most important was this: civilian and military infrastructure should be indistinguishable until the moment you need to fight. The drone moved to Luna, Earth's moon. It scanned the research base built into the crater Copernicus. The base appeared to be studying astronomy and geology, with large telescope arrays and seismic monitoring stations. The drone's sensors showed no military presence. Those sensors failed to penetrate the lunar regolith that humans had specifically processed to block advanced scanning technology. They did not detect the railguns hidden beneath false rock formations. They missed the missile silos disguised as ventilation shafts. They had no idea that the telescope arrays could track and target spacecraft with lethal precision. At Europa, the drone found a small scientific outpost on the ice-covered moon of Jupiter. Fewer than 1,000 researchers lived there, studying the ocean beneath the ice. The structures were minimal, clearly focused on research rather than military application. The drone did not realize that those research vessels exploring the sub-ice ocean used the same propulsion and stealth technology as Earth's submarine fleet. It did not understand that the ice mining equipment could core through a starship hull in seconds. It saw scientists and missed the soldiers trained to look like scientists. Titan presented a similar picture: mining operations, atmospheric research, hydrocarbon processing, all perfectly legitimate civilian activities, all completely harmless, all completely deceptive. The drones returned to the Concordate vessel, their databanks full of information that told Velthor exactly what he expected to see: a species unprepared for the dangers of the galaxy, vulnerable to pressure, ripe for exploitation. "They have no significant military infrastructure," Tarkin reported, reviewing the drone data. "Their colonies are civilian operations with minimal defensive capability. Their orbital space is largely undefended. They have achieved faster-than-light travel, but they have not militarized it." Velthor felt satisfaction settle through him. This would be one of the easier integrations. The humans would see reason once they understood their vulnerability. Most species did. "Prepare annexation protocols," he ordered. "Standard package. When they decline our offer, and their leader's tone suggests they will, we will need to demonstrate the risks of refusing concordate protection." Kiranel's 4 hands moved across her console. "I will contact the Raider fleet. They can be here within 3 standard cycles." "Make it so," Velthor said. "A few attacks from unknown hostiles will help the humans understand the value of our protection." It was a script the Concordate had followed dozens of times. It never failed. While the aliens planned Earth's subjugation, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was having the most exciting day of her career. The intelligence division had successfully infiltrated the Concordate communication network, and the data flowing in was remarkable. "They think we're defenseless," she told General Marcus Steele over a secure channel. She was in her office at intelligence headquarters in Tokyo, surrounded by screens displaying alien transmissions. They scanned everything and saw nothing that worried them. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. He was at Unified Defense Command headquarters, watching similar data streams. "Good. That means the stealth systems work even better than we hoped. What about their fleet composition?" Yuki pulled up a detailed analysis. "Their main vessel is impressive but vulnerable. Large, slow, designed to intimidate rather than fight. It has weapons, but the placement suggests they've never needed to use them in actual combat. The shield generators are external. Beautiful engineering, but tactically stupid. Take out the generators, and the shields collapse. What about their combat doctrine? That's the interesting part, Yuki said, leaning forward. Her eyes gleamed with the excitement of discovery. They don't have one. Not really. I've analyzed 300 years of concordate records. They've never fought an equal opponent. Every conflict has been against pre-industrial civilizations or early space-age cultures. They show up, look impressive, and the other side surrenders. The few times they've faced resistance, they used mercenary raiders to harass their targets until they capitulated. Marcus absorbed this information. So they're bullies who've never been punched in the face. Exactly. And it gets better. I found their target list. After the humans, they plan to move on to the Centauri system, then Tau Ceti, then Epsilon Eridani. They're working their way through every species that develops FTL. It's systematic exploitation dressed up as benevolence. How many species are under their protection? 47, like they said. But here's what they didn't say. Those species provide resources, labor, and tribute that keeps the concordate economy running. It's an empire without calling itself an empire. Smart, in a cynical way. Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking, what about other powers in the galaxy? Are we surrounded by empires like the Concordate? Yuki shook her head. No, and that's the most interesting discovery. The galaxy is mostly peaceful. Real threats are rare. The Concordate has been lying to their protectorates for 3,000 years, telling them the galaxy is dangerous when it's actually relatively safe. They created the protection racket by inventing threats that don't exist. So when they tell species they need protection, they're solving a problem they invented. It's brilliant and evil. Marcus stood, pacing his office. Decades of military experience had taught him to see patterns in chaos. A picture was forming in his mind, and he did not like it. They're going to push us, he said quietly. They'll expect us to fold when they pressure us. When we don't, they'll escalate. They'll use those mercenary raiders to attack civilian targets, make us scared, force us to accept their protection. Can we stop them? Marcus smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. Dr. Tanaka, we've been preparing for hostile first contact since we first left Earth's orbit. We've studied every war, every conflict, every tactical innovation in human history. We've built weapon systems these aliens can't imagine because they've never needed to imagine them. Can we stop them? The question is whether we'll need to stop them or just scare them badly enough that they run. While Earth's military analyzed the Concordate's weaknesses, President Sarah Chen was having her own revelations. She sat in her private office, reading through historical files that the intelligence division had compiled. They made for disturbing reading. Every species that had accepted Concordate protection showed the same pattern. Initial enthusiasm followed by slowly increasing demands. Resource quotas that grew every year. Technology sharing that only flowed one direction. Populations that became dependent on Concordate trade and unable to sustain themselves independently. The protected species were prisoners who did not realize they were in jail. Sarah had not become president by being naive. She understood power and how it was wielded. The Concordate was offering a deal that sounded generous but was actually a trap. Accept protection today, lose your freedom tomorrow. The question was how to refuse without triggering a war Earth might not win. The preliminary analysis from Marcus suggested they could defeat the Concordate fleet in Earth's system, but what about the larger Concordate military? What about their allies and vassals? What about the 47 species who might side with their protectors? Her secure phone rang. It was Marcus. Madam President, I'm sending you a full tactical analysis. Short version, we can take them. The Concordate has size and technology advantages, but we have something better. What's that? We know how to fight. They don't. They've been winning through intimidation for so long that they've forgotten how to actually wage war. We've never forgotten because we've never been able to afford to forget. Sarah felt something settle in her chest. Not confidence exactly, but resolution. Earth had a chance. That was enough. Send me everything, she said. I give our answer to the Concordate in 18 hours. I want to know every option we have. She hung up and turned to look out her window. Geneva spread out below, beautiful and peaceful in the afternoon light. People walked the streets unaware that their world hung in the balance. Children played in parks. Couples held hands by the lake. Life continued in blissful ignorance of the threat overhead. Sarah had sworn an oath to protect these people. She would not fail them. Aboard the Concordat vessel, Velthor received a message from his superiors. They had reviewed his reports and approved his recommendations. When the humans declined protection as expected, the raider fleet would be deployed. A few months of harassment would bring Earth into compliance. It always worked. Velthor prepared for the next day's meeting with something approaching boredom. He had done this 47 times before. The script never changed. Humans would be number 48. He had no idea that humanity was about to teach the Concordat a lesson 3,000 years in the making. The Predator was about to discover it had cornered something far more dangerous than itself. The United Earth Assembly Hall was packed with even more people than 2 days before. Representatives from every nation sat in their designated seats, but now they were joined by military officers, scientists, and historians. The air hummed with tension. Everyone knew this meeting would change everything. President Sarah Chen stood at the central podium, wearing a simple dark suit. She had considered wearing something more formal, but decided against it. This was not a day for ceremony. This was a day for truth. Ambassador Velthor and his delegation entered exactly on time. The aliens moved with the same graceful confidence they had shown before, clearly expecting this to be a formality before Earth's inevitable acceptance. Velthor's golden eyes swept across the assembled humans, and Sarah could almost see him counting his victory. "Madam President," Velthor said, his voice carrying that same melodious quality. "Have you reached a decision regarding the Concordat's generous offer?" Sarah smiled. It was a polite smile, diplomatic and proper. It was also completely genuine, which would have worried Velthor if he had understood human expressions better. "We have, Ambassador. Thank you for your patience while we considered your proposal." She paused, letting the moment stretch. "Earth respectfully declines the Concordat's offer of protection." The silence that followed was absolute. Velthor stood frozen, his expression suggesting he had misheard. Around him, the other delegates shifted uncomfortably. "I apologize," Velthor said carefully. "Perhaps the translation was unclear. You decline our protection?" "That's correct," Sarah confirmed. "We appreciate the offer, but Earth is quite capable of managing our own affairs. We prefer to maintain our independence." Velthor's golden eyes narrowed. The diplomatic mask began to slip. "Madam President, I do not think you understand the situation. The galaxy is dangerous. Without Concordat protection, you will be vulnerable to countless threats. Your species has only just achieved faster-than-light travel. You are children taking your first steps into a universe you do not understand." "We understand more than you think," Sarah replied calmly. "Do you?" Velthor's voice hardened. "Let me be clear, since subtlety seems wasted. Species who refuse Concordat protection find themselves facing difficult circumstances. Raiders attack their vessels. Pirates raid their colonies. Mysterious accidents occur. It would be tragic if Earth suffered similar misfortunes." Around the assembly hall, Sarah could feel the mood shifting. The threat was no longer veiled. It hung in the air like smoke. "Ambassador," Sarah said quietly, "are you threatening us?" Velthor drew himself up to his full height, towering over the human president. "I am explaining reality. The Concordat maintains order in this region of space. Those who cooperate with us prosper, those who do not." He let the sentence hang. Sarah nodded slowly, as if considering his words. "I see. So when you offered us protection, what you actually meant was, pay us tribute or we'll hurt you. Is that a fair translation?" Velthor's face darkened. "You are being deliberately obtuse. This is your final opportunity to make the intelligent choice. Accept our protection, or accept the consequences of refusing it." Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked every alien in the room. She laughed. It was not a nervous laugh or a mocking laugh. It was genuine amusement, the kind of laughter that comes from hearing something absurd. Around the assembly hall, other humans began to laugh too. Quiet chuckles at first, then louder. Within seconds, the entire room was filled with the sound of human laughter. Velthor stared, completely confused. This was not in the script. Species were supposed to be frightened when threatened. They were supposed to see reason and accept protection. They were not supposed to laugh. "I fail to see what is amusing," he said coldly. Sarah's laughter faded, but her smile remained. "Ambassador, you came to our world, scanned our defenses, and concluded we were helpless. You offered us protection we don't need from threats that don't exist. And now you're threatening us, expecting us to be scared. The amusing part is that you have no idea who you're threatening." "We know exactly who you are," Velthor snapped. "A primitive species with delusions of competence. Your scans show minimal defenses. Your colonies are unprotected. Your orbital space is vulnerable. You achieved faster-than-light travel, but you never learned to defend yourselves." "Is that what your scans showed?" Sarah asked. She touched a control on the podium, and the lights in the assembly hall dimmed. Above them, holographic displays activated showing Earth's solar system. "Let me show you what your scans missed." The display changed. Red dots began appearing throughout the solar system. First dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. They surrounded Earth like a cloud of angry insects. They clustered around Luna and Mars. They hid among the asteroid belt. They orbited Jupiter's moons and Saturn's rings. Velthor stared at the display, his golden eyes wide. "What is this?" "These are Earth's actual defenses," Sarah explained calmly. "Every red dot represents a weapons platform, military installation, or combat-ready vessel. We built them over the last century, ever since we developed reliable spaceflight. We hid them inside civilian structures, disguised them as research stations, camouflaged them in asteroids. We learned something important from our history, Ambassador. The best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have." General Marcus Steele stood from his seat in the assembly. He was in full dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest, each one representing a conflict or achievement. He moved to stand beside Sarah. "Ambassador Velthor," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "You made a critical mistake. You looked at Earth and saw no weapons platforms because you don't recognize our weapons platforms. You saw peaceful colonies because we built them to look peaceful. You concluded we were unprepared because we wanted you to think that." On the holographic display, one of the red dots near Luna expanded. It showed the interior of what the Concordat had identified as an astronomical research station. Cameras revealed rows of railguns, missile batteries, and power cores that could light up a small city. "This is Copernicus Station," Marcus continued. "Your drones scanned it and found telescopes. They missed the fact that those telescopes can track spacecraft with lethal precision. They didn't realize the entire station is a fortress built into the lunar surface." Another dot expanded, showing a mining facility on an asteroid, except it was not just a mining facility. The mining lasers could cut through starship armor. The ore processors could manufacture ammunition. The cargo vessels were actually troop transports. "This is Ceres Mining Complex," Marcus said. "Perfectly legitimate resource extraction. Also perfectly capable of defending itself against attack." Velthor found his voice. You hid your military infrastructure inside civilian facilities. That violates the Concordat protocols for civilized warfare." Marcus smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. "Ambassador, we never agreed to your protocols. And here's something you should understand about humans. We've been fighting wars since before we invented writing. We've studied warfare as an art form for thousands of years. We've perfected tactics and strategies that you've never needed to develop because you've never faced real opposition." Sarah touched another control. The holographic display changed again, showing the space around the Concordat vessel. More red dots appeared, these ones surrounding the alien ship like a noose tightening around a neck. "Your ship is currently surrounded by 17 stealth vessels," Sarah said quietly. "They've been shadowing you since you arrived. You never detected them because our stealth technology is more advanced than your scanning technology. Each of those vessels carries enough firepower to cripple your ship." Velthor stepped back, his composure cracking. "This is... You cannot what?" Sarah asked. "Cannot defend ourselves? Cannot refuse your extortion? Cannot object to being threatened in our own system?" She stepped down from the podium and walked toward the alien ambassador. Despite being half his height, she somehow seemed larger, more commanding. "Let me make something very clear, Ambassador. Earth does not need your protection. We do not want your protection, and we will not accept your threats. You came here expecting us to be frightened children. Instead, you found something you've never encountered before, a species that prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. You are making a terrible mistake," Velthor said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "The Concordat has resources you cannot imagine, fleets that could darken your skies, allies who would support our enforcement of order." "Really?" Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood, moving to join Sarah and Marcus. She held a data pad. "Because according to our intelligence analysis, the Concordat has never fought a peer military engagement. Every one of your conflicts has been against pre-industrial civilizations or early space-age cultures. You win through intimidation, not combat. You use mercenary raiders to harass targets until they accept your protection. It's a sophisticated protection racket, Ambassador, but it's still just a racket." Velthor's face went through several shades of purple. "Your accusations are baseless, are they?" Yuki activated her data pad and the holographic display changed again. It showed communications intercepts, financial records, deployment orders for raider fleets. "We've been inside your communication network for 2 days. We know about the raiders you plan to send to attack our colonies. We know about the artificial threats you've used to scare other species into compliance. We know the truth about the Concordat, Ambassador. You're not protectors. You're predators." Velthor looked around the assembly hall, seeing the hostile expressions on hundreds of human faces. His delegation clustered behind him, clearly frightened. This had gone completely off script. "You will regret this," he said, trying to recover some dignity. "The Concordat does not tolerate rogue civilizations. We will return with force sufficient to ensure your compliance." "Will you?" Marcus asked. He pulled up another display, this one showing a detailed analysis of the Concordat vessel's weaknesses. "Your shield generators are external. Your power distribution system has 17 critical points of failure. Your weapon systems have a 20-second delay between target acquisition and firing. Your ship is designed to look impressive, not to fight. We could disable it in under 3 minutes if we wanted to." "But we don't want to," Sarah interjected. "Because despite what you think of us, we actually prefer peace. So here's our counteroffer, Ambassador. Leave our system. Never return. Tell your Concordat that Earth is not interested in their protection racket. Tell them that if they send raiders to attack us, we will destroy those raiders. Tell them that if they send fleets to threaten us, we will destroy those fleets. And tell them that we know the truth about their empire and we're not keeping that knowledge secret." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Or if you prefer, we can resolve this matter right now. You can test whether our defenses are as capable as we claim. You can find out whether human military doctrine is superior to Concordat intimidation. You can discover what happens when a predator corners something more dangerous than itself." The assembly hall was silent. Every human watched the aliens, waiting to see how they would respond. The tension was thick enough to cut. Velthor looked at Sarah, at Marcus, at the holographic displays showing Earth's hidden arsenal. He looked at the faces of humanity's leaders and saw something that terrified him more than weapons or threats. He saw certainty. These beings were not bluffing. They were ready to fight and they believed they could win. "This is not over," Velthor said, his voice barely controlled. "The Concordat will hear of this insult." "Please do tell them," Sarah said pleasantly. "And when you do, make sure you mention one more thing." "What?" "We choose peace. We prefer peace. We will pursue peace whenever possible. But we are very, very good at the alternative. We've had 10,000 years to practice." Velthor turned and strode toward the exit, his delegation hurrying to keep up. At the doorway, he paused and looked back. "You ask if we know who we are threatening," he said. "Do you know what you are defying?" Sarah smiled. "The difference is, Ambassador, we actually do." The aliens left. Their shuttle departed within the hour. The great Concordat vessel pulled away from Earth's orbit, and surrounded by human stealth ships that never let it out of their sight, retreated toward the edge of the solar system. Throughout Earth, billions of people watched the alien ship leave. Some cheered. Others worried about what would come next. But all of them felt something new, pride that humanity had stood its ground, and confidence that they had made the right choice. In the assembly hall, Sarah turned to Marcus and Yuki. "Well," she said quietly, "that could have gone worse." Marcus laughed. "Madam President, I've been in combat for 30 years. That was the most satisfying confrontation of my life. Do you think they'll come back? Yuki asked. Oh, they'll come back, Marcus said. The question is whether they come back to talk or to fight. Either way, we'll be ready. Sarah nodded. She looked at the holographic display, still showing Earth's defenses. Thousands of red dots, each representing years of planning and preparation. Humanity's shield against the darkness. We stood up to a galactic empire today, she said. Let's make sure we're ready to back up that stand. The Concordat vessel limped toward the edge of Earth's solar system, surrounded by human stealth ships that followed its every move. Aboard the bridge, Ambassador Velthor sat in his command chair, his golden eyes fixed on the view screen showing the blue planet growing smaller behind them. Status report, he ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Tarkin, the science officer, worked at his console with nervous clicks of his mandibles. We are being tracked by at least 30 human vessels. Possibly more. Their stealth technology is far more advanced than our intelligence suggested. I cannot get accurate readings. Can we outrun them? No, Ambassador. They match our every course correction. If we attempt to engage our faster-than-light drive while still in the system, they will interpret it as an aggressive move. Velthor's hands clenched on the armrests of his chair. He had been outmaneuvered completely. The humans had turned what should have been a simple integration into a humiliating defeat. Worse, they had done it without firing a single shot. Send a priority message to Concordat High Command, he ordered. Mark it urgent. Tell them we need a full military response. Kiranel, the tactical officer, turned from her station. All 4 of her arms were tense. Ambassador, with respect, perhaps we should recommend negotiation rather than escalation. The humans demonstrated capabilities we did not anticipate. A military engagement might not go as planned. Velthor rounded on her. Are you suggesting we accept this insult? That we allow a primitive species to defy 3,000 years of Concordat authority? No. We will return with sufficient force to ensure these humans understand their place in the galactic order. He turned back to the view screen, watching Earth disappear into the distance. They think they are strong. They think their hidden weapons make them our equals. They will learn otherwise. What Velthor did not know was that every word spoken on his bridge was being transmitted back to Earth. The humans had not just hacked the Concordat communication network. They had planted monitoring devices throughout the alien vessel during the initial meeting. Small, almost invisible transmitters that looked like dust particles but broadcast everything to waiting receivers. In Tokyo, Dr. Yuki Tanaka listened to Velthor's rant and smiled. She turned to her team of intelligence analysts. He's going to escalate, she said, which means we need to implement Phase 2. Are we really doing this? Asked one of the younger analysts, a man named James Chen. He looked nervous. Broadcasting Concordat secrets to the entire galaxy? We are, Yuki confirmed. The Concordat survives because their victims don't know they're victims. They believe the lies about galactic dangers. They think they need protection. Once they learn the truth, the whole system collapses. She pulled up a star map showing the 47 species under Concordat protection. Each one was marked with detailed information. When they joined, what resources they provided, what threats they were told to fear. These species deserve to know the truth, Yuki said. And humanity is going to give it to them. While Earth prepared its information campaign, the Concordat was preparing for war. High Command received Velthor's report with shock and anger. For the first time in 3,000 years, a species had rejected their offer and survived the initial confrontation. The Concordat leadership met an emergency session on their capital world, Kelvan Prime. 7 high counselors, 1 from each founding species, gathered in a chamber that had witnessed countless decisions about the fate of lesser species. High Counselor Sharkin, eldest of the group, spoke first. His species lived for over 400 years, and he had seen the Concordat grow from a small alliance to a galactic power. The humans must be taught a lesson. We cannot allow this defiance to stand. It will encourage others to resist. Agreed, said High Counselor Telvash, but we must approach this carefully. The humans demonstrated unexpected capabilities. A full military response might be costly. Costly? Sharkin's voice rose. What cost is too high to maintain order? If we appear weak, if we allow the humans to defy us without consequence, our entire structure will collapse. The protected species will begin asking questions. They will begin demanding independence. Then we need overwhelming force, said another counselor. Send a fleet large enough that resistance is impossible. Make an example of Earth. The other species will see and remember. The vote was unanimous. The Concordat would assemble a battle fleet, the largest in recent history, and return to Earth. The humans would surrender or be destroyed. It took 5 days to gather the fleet. 12 massive warships, each larger than the diplomatic vessel that had visited Earth. Escort ships, support vessels, and troop transports. In total, over 100 spacecraft preparing to enforce Concordat, will on a defiant species. Velthor was given command of the fleet. It was both an honor and a test. If he succeeded, he would be celebrated. If he failed, he would be disgraced. He accepted the command with determination. The humans had embarrassed him. He would not allow it to happen again. The fleet departed for Earth system, confident in their superiority. They did not know that human long-range sensors had tracked every ship movement. They did not realize that Earth had been preparing for their arrival from the moment Velthor's vessel left. General Marcus Steele stood in Unified Defense Command, watching the plot of approaching Concordat forces. Around him, his staff worked with calm efficiency. This was the moment they had trained for, the scenario they had run 1,000 times in simulation. ETA on the Concordat fleet? He asked. 17 hours, replied his operations officer. They're not trying to hide their approach. This is a show of force, Marcus nodded. Good, let them feel confident. Confidence makes people careless. He turned to his communication officer. Is Dr. Tanaka ready with the broadcast? Standing by, sir. She can transmit on your order. Hold for now. Let's see if we can resolve this without bloodshed. Marcus did not particularly expect a peaceful resolution, but he had to try. Humanity had fought enough wars against itself. He would prefer not to start one against aliens if it could be avoided. President Sarah Chen joined him in the command center. She had barely slept since the Concordat's departure, coordinating Earth's response with military, scientific, and diplomatic teams. Options? She asked Marcus. We can destroy them, Marcus said bluntly. The fleet they're bringing is impressive by their standards. By ours, it's a target-rich environment. Our stealth ships alone could cripple half their vessels before they realize they were under attack. But that starts a war we might not want. The Concordat has allies, vassals, and resources across dozens of systems. We can win the battle, maybe even win a war, but at what cost? Sarah nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. What if we give them a different lesson? Not about human military power, but about human history. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Explain. Velthor said something during our meeting that stuck with me. He said we were children taking our first steps into the universe. What if we show him exactly what kind of children we are? What we've survived, what we've learned, what we've become? A history lesson in the middle of a military confrontation? Why not? Knowledge is a weapon too. Maybe the most powerful one we have, Marcus considered this. It was unconventional, but then again, everything about humanity's approach to first contact had been unconventional. Let me talk to Dr. Tanaka. If anyone can make that work, she can. 4 hours later, the Concordat fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system. They formed up in standard battle formation, ships arranged in a pattern designed to maximize firepower while maintaining defensive positions. It was intimidating, overwhelming, exactly what they intended. Velthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth's blue sphere appear on the view screen. Open a channel to the human leadership. It is time to end this foolishness. The channel opened and President Chen's face appeared on the screen. She looked calm, almost relaxed, which bothered Velthor more than he wanted to admit. Ambassador, she said pleasantly, welcome back. I see you brought friends. This is your final opportunity, Velthor said, dispensing with diplomatic niceties. Surrender. Accept Concordat protection. Your resistance is pointless. As you can see, we have assembled sufficient force to ensure compliance. I see a lot of ships, Sarah agreed. But before we discuss surrender, I'd like to share something with you. A gift, if you will. Information that might change your perspective. We are not interested in human attempts at delay. This will only take a few minutes, Sarah interrupted. And trust me, Ambassador, you want to see this. Before Velthor could object, data began flooding the Concordat communication network. Not just to his ship, but to every vessel in the fleet. And not just to the fleet, but to every Concordat-controlled system in the galaxy. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had created a comprehensive data package, It contained human history, from the earliest civilizations to the present day. But this was not a simple chronology. This was a military history, a tactical analysis, a strategic documentation of 10,000 years of human warfare. The aliens watched first with confusion, then with growing horror. They saw images of ancient battles, thousands of warriors clashing with bronze weapons. They saw the tactics of Alexander the Great, conquering most of the known world with a relatively small army. They saw the strategic genius of Sun Tzu, written 2,000 years before humans left their planet. They saw the Roman legions, the Mongol hordes, the medieval sieges. They saw gunpowder weapons, trench warfare, mechanized combat. They saw atomic weapons capable of destroying entire cities in seconds. They saw the Cold War, where two human factions held each other hostage with enough nuclear weapons to render Earth uninhabitable, and somehow avoided using them. But more than the weapons and battles, they saw the theories, the strategies, the philosophies of warfare that humans had developed over millennia. They saw writings on the nature of conflict, on tactical innovation, on strategic planning. They saw how humans approached war not as a necessity, but as a problem to be solved, a challenge to be overcome through intelligence and creativity. The data package included analysis comparing human warfare to concordate operations. It was not a flattering comparison. Where the concordate relied on intimidation and overwhelming force against weaker opponents, humans had learned to fight equals and superiors. Where the concordate had standard tactics, humans had developed thousands of tactical variations. Where the concordate saw war as a tool for control, humans saw it as an art form that required constant study and improvement. Aboard the concordate flagship, Velthor watched the data with growing unease. Beside him, Tarkin's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of severe stress. "This cannot be accurate," Velthor said. "No species fights among themselves for this long. It is irrational. It is wasteful. It is their history," Tarkin replied quietly. "And it explains everything. They built their defenses the way they did because they have been fighting defensive wars for thousands of years. They hid their weapons because they have been ambushing enemies for thousands of years. They prepared for worst-case scenarios because they have experienced worst-case scenarios for thousands of years." "They are barbaric," Velthor insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. The data package continued. It showed humanity's unification, achieved not through conquest but through recognition that their own weapons had become too dangerous. It showed the mutual defense doctrine, where Earth's nations agreed that an attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. It showed the Unified Defense Command, created specifically to prepare for extraterrestrial threats. And then it showed Earth's current military capability. Not everything. Humans knew better than to reveal all their secrets, but enough. Ship designs that prioritized survivability over appearance. Weapon systems that could engage targets from beyond the concordate sensor range. Stealth technology that made detection nearly impossible. Defensive networks that could coordinate thousands of independent units into a single overwhelming response. The message was clear. Earth had prepared for this confrontation for over a century. The concordate had stumbled into a fight they could not win. Velthor sat in his command chair, his mind racing. This changed everything. The humans were not primitives. They were something far more dangerous. Experienced warriors with advanced technology and a strategic doctrine built from thousands of years of harsh lessons. "Sir," Kiranel said quietly, "I recommend we withdraw and request reinforcements." "Reinforcements?" Velthor laughed bitterly. "Against what? A species that has been practicing war since before our civilization existed? This is not a military problem. This is," he struggled to find words. "This is a fundamental miscalculation." A new transmission came through. Sarah Chen's face reappeared on the view screen. "Ambassador," she said, "I hope you've had time to review our historical records. I wanted you to understand who you're threatening. We are not defenseless children. We are survivors of countless wars, students of warfare itself, and we have spent a century preparing for this exact situation." She leaned forward slightly. "But here's what I want you to understand. We learned something from all that warfare. We learned that violence should be the last resort, not the first option. We learned that strength means having the power to destroy your enemy and choosing not to. We learned that the greatest victory is the one you win without fighting." Velthor found his voice. "You are lecturing me about peace while surrounded by weapons?" "No," Sarah said. "I'm teaching you the difference between strength and cruelty. The Concordat has power, but you use it to exploit the weak. Humanity has power, and we use it to protect ourselves and others. That's why we're offering you a choice right now. What choice? Leave, take your fleet and go. Return to your Concordat and tell them that Earth is not interested in their protection. Tell them that if they send raiders to attack us, those raiders will not return. Tell them that if they send fleets to threaten us, those fleets will be destroyed. And tell them that we know the truth about their empire, and we are sharing that truth with every species you claim to protect. She paused, her expression hardening. Or you can try to fight us. You can test whether your fleet can overcome our defenses. You can find out what happens when a species that has studied warfare for 10,000 years has to demonstrate what they've learned. But I'm giving you fair warning, Ambassador. We will win, and unlike you, we've actually had to fight for our survival. We know how to do this. Velthor looked at his tactical displays. He saw his fleet powerful and impressive. He also saw the red dots that had appeared around them, human vessels that had been waiting, hidden, ready to strike. He was surrounded, outmaneuvered, and facing an enemy he did not understand. You would really destroy us? He asked quietly. If you force us to, Sarah replied. But we would much prefer that you simply leave. Go home, Ambassador. Tell your Concordat that they made a mistake. Tell them that humanity is not afraid of them. And tell them that if they want peace with us, they need to approach as equals, not as masters. The channel closed. Velthor sat in silence, aware that every member of his crew was watching him, waiting for his decision. He had two choices: fight and likely die, taking thousands of Concordat personnel with him, or retreat and face disgrace but live to see tomorrow. It was not really a choice at all. Set course for home, he ordered quietly. Full retreat. The Concordat fleet turned and fled, harried by human ships that followed them to the edge of the system before breaking off. No shots were fired. No weapons were discharged. But the battle was over, and everyone knew who had won. The news of the Concordat's retreat spread through the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's data package had been sent not just to the Concordat fleet but to every species under their so-called protection. Within days, the truth about the Concordat's empire was common knowledge across 47 star systems. The reactions were dramatic and immediate. On Telos 4, a species that had been providing rare minerals to the Concordat for 300 years. The Planetary Council held an emergency meeting. They had believed they were paying for protection from hostile aliens. Now they learned those hostile aliens did not exist. The Concordat had been lying to them for centuries. We have been fools, said Council Leader Renval, an elderly being whose blue skin had faded with age. We sent our children to work in the mines, extracting minerals we needed for ourselves, and gave them to the Concordat for protection from imaginary threats. What do we do now? Asked another council member. We stop paying, Renval said simply, and we contact Earth. If the humans can stand against the Concordat, perhaps they can teach us to do the same. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Species that had been submissive for generations began asking questions. Why did they need protection if the galaxy was not actually dangerous? Why should they share their resources with the Concordat? What gave the Concordat the right to govern their external affairs? The Concordat's empire began to crack. On Kelvin Prime, the Concordat capital, the High Council met in crisis session. They had received reports from dozens of systems. Protests, refusal to pay tribute, demands for independence. The carefully constructed system they had built over 3,000 years was collapsing. This is the humans' fault, High Councillor Sharken said angrily. They released classified information. They undermined our authority. We should consider this an act of war. Against whom? Asked High Councillor Telvash. The humans? We tried that and failed. The protected species. If we attack them, we prove the humans right about us being predators. We could offer the humans membership in the Concordat, suggested another councillor. Make them partners rather than enemies. Use their military strength to reinforce our position. They would never accept, Telvash said. Did you not watch the same briefings I did? The humans are not interested in empire. They want something we have never considered. Genuine cooperation without domination. The debate continued for hours, then days. The Concordat leadership was discovering something painful. Once people learn they have been lied to, it is almost impossible to restore their trust. Meanwhile, on Earth, President Sarah Chen was dealing with an unexpected problem: success. Her office was flooded with communication requests from alien species. They all wanted the same things: information about the Concordat, advice on achieving independence, and in many cases, requests for Earth to provide the protection that the Concordat had falsely offered. "We cannot become the new Concordat," Sarah told her cabinet during an emergency meeting. "We cannot promise to protect every species in the galaxy. We do not have the resources, and more importantly, we do not have the right." "But we cannot ignore them either," argued her foreign minister. "These species are reaching out to us for help. If we turn them away, they might fall back under Concordat control or find themselves vulnerable to actual threats." General Marcus Steele had been quiet during most of the meeting, but now he spoke. "What if we offer something different? Not protection, but partnership. We teach them what we know about defense. We help them build their own military capabilities. We create a network of mutual defense where everyone contributes." Sarah considered this a true alliance. Not a hierarchy where we sit at the top, but a collective where everyone has equal say. "Exactly," Marcus said. "We share our strategic knowledge. They share their technology and resources. Together, we create a galaxy where species cooperate because they want to, not because they are forced to." The idea took shape quickly. Earth proposed the Terran Accord, named not as a claim to leadership but as a recognition of where the idea originated. The principles were simple: mutual defense without dominance, technology sharing without exploitation, and collective security without submission. The first species to join was Telos IV. Council leader Renval traveled to Earth personally to sign the agreement. He was old, frail by his species' standards, but his eyes were bright with hope. "For 300 years we lived in fear," he told Sarah during the signing ceremony. "Fear of threats that did not exist. The Concordat took our resources and our dignity. Today we reclaim both." Other species followed. Within 6 months, 12 former Concordat protectorates had joined the Terran Accord. Within a year, 23. The Concordat's empire was not just cracking, it was crumbling. But not all of the Concordat species accepted the change gracefully. The 7 founding species split into factions. 3 approached Earth seeking partnership, recognizing that their old system was unsustainable. 2 attempted to maintain their empire through military force, attacking species that refused to pay tribute. 2 isolated themselves, unwilling to accept the new reality but lacking the power to fight it. The 2 factions that chose violence learned a harsh lesson. The species they attacked had received training from Earth's military advisors. Defensive networks that had once been non-existent now coordinated responses. Weapons that had been primitive were now modern and effective. The Concordat ships that arrived expecting easy victories instead faced prepared defenses and suffered devastating defeats. After the 3rd failed attack, the aggressive factions retreated and reconsidered their approach. Violence was no longer profitable. The Terran Accord grew rapidly. Earth established the Terran Defense Academy on Luna, where officers from dozens of species learned human military doctrine. The classes were taught by veterans of Earth's own conflicts, people who understood warfare from hard experience. General Marcus Steele oversaw the academy personally. He walked through the training facilities, watching alien cadets learning tactics that humans had refined over millennia. It was strange and wonderful to see beings from across the galaxy studying the battles of Napoleon, the strategies of Sun Tzu, the defensive doctrines of modern Earth. One day, he stopped to watch a tactical simulation. A mixed team of humans and aliens were working together to defend a colony from a simulated attack. They were struggling, making mistakes, but they were learning. "It is harder than it looks," said a voice beside him. Marcus turned to see Ambassador Velthor standing there, watching the same simulation. Marcus tensed. The last time they had met, Velthor had been commanding a fleet sent to conquer Earth. Now the former ambassador stood in a training facility, wearing civilian clothes and looking smaller somehow. "Less imposing, Ambassador," Marcus said carefully. "I did not know you were on Luna." "I requested asylum 6 months ago," Velthor replied. "President Chen granted it. I am not an ambassador anymore. Just Velthor, a being trying to understand where everything went wrong." They watched the simulation in silence for a moment. The cadet team was starting to coordinate better, using the defensive positions Marcus had taught them about. "I was taught that power meant control. Velthor said quietly. The Concordate's entire philosophy was built on the idea that stronger species should guide weaker ones. It seemed logical, natural. But watching these cadets, seeing species from across the galaxy learning to defend themselves, I realized what we never understood. What's that? True strength is not controlling others. It is helping them become strong enough that they do not need control. Marcus nodded slowly. That took humans about 6,000 years to figure out. You are learning faster than we did. Velthor managed a small smile, perhaps because we had better teachers. The Academy graduated its first class 2 years after the Concordate's defeat. President Sarah Chen attended the ceremony, along with leaders from 23 Terran Accord species. The graduates stood in formation, representing a dozen different species, united by common training and shared purpose. Sarah addressed them from a podium overlooking the parade ground. Behind her, Earth rose above Luna's horizon, blue and green and beautiful. 2 years ago, the galaxy was a different place, she began. Species lived in fear, controlled by those claiming to protect them. Today you represent something new, a galaxy where strength serves peace rather than conquest, where knowledge is shared rather than hoarded, where species stand together because they choose to, not because they are forced to. She paused, looking at the assembled graduates. You came here to learn how to fight. I hope you learned that lesson well. But I hope you also learned something more important. Why we fight. We fight so others do not have to. We prepare for war so we can maintain peace. We become strong not to dominate the weak, but to protect them, including protecting them from becoming victims of their own fear. The graduates listened intently. These were beings from worlds humans had never heard of until recently. Species with strange names and stranger appearances. But they all understood what Sarah was saying. They had all been taught by instructors who had lived through wars and learned their lessons the hard way. The greatest victory, Sarah continued, is not defeating an enemy. It is never having to fight because your enemy respects both your capability and your restraint. You carry that lesson with you as you return to your homeworlds. Teach it to others. Build defenses that make invasion unthinkable, but never forget that weapons are tools, not solutions. The goal is not to win wars. The goal is to prevent them. The ceremony concluded with a flyover by ships from 12 different species, flying in formation above the lunar surface. It was a sight that would have been impossible 2 years earlier. Now it was the new normal. After the ceremony, Sarah met privately with Velthor. The former ambassador had been attending classes at the Academy, studying human history and military theory. He'd become an advocate for concordate reform, writing essays and giving speeches about the mistakes his people had made. Your speech was powerful, he told Sarah. Do you believe what you said? That the goal is to prevent wars rather than win them? I do, Sarah said. But I also believe in preparing to win if prevention fails. Humanity learned that balance through painful experience. The Concordate never learned it at all, Velthor said. We became comfortable. We forgot that power without wisdom is just tyranny, and tyranny never lasts forever. What will you do now? Sarah asked. Continue teaching, Velthor said. I have been invited to speak on Kelvin Prime, to the new government that formed after the old High Council collapsed. They want to rebuild the Concordate as something better, something more like the Terran Accord. I will help them if I can, Sarah smiled. That is good. The galaxy needs more voices advocating for cooperation. 5 years after the Concordate's defeat, the galaxy had transformed. The Terran Accord included 41 species, nearly all of the former Concordate protectorates plus several species who had been truly independent. Trade flourished. Technology was shared freely. Species that had never met now worked together on scientific projects, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense. The Concordate itself had reformed. The 3 species who had approached Earth for partnership led the effort to create something new, a true federation where members had equal votes and no single species dominated. They called it the Reformed Concordate, and they applied to join the Terran Accord as a full member. President Chen, now in her second term, presided over the ceremony where the Reformed Concordate joined the Accord. It was held on a neutral world, a beautiful planet called Haven that had volunteered to host the event. Representatives from 64 species attended. They filled an enormous amphitheater carved into a mountainside, with translation devices ensuring everyone could understand everyone else. It was chaotic and beautiful and completely unprecedented. 5 years ago, Sarah told the assembled representatives, Earth faced a choice. Accept domination or fight for independence. We chose independence, but we also chose to share what we learned. Today we see the results of that choice. A galaxy united not by force but by mutual respect. She looked around at the incredible diversity of beings present. We have built something remarkable, a community where strength serves peace, where knowledge flows freely, where species cooperate because they recognize that together, we are stronger than we could ever be alone. The Terran Accord is not an empire. It is not a hierarchy. It is a promise that we will defend each other, learn from each other, and grow together. The amphitheater erupted in applause, though the sound varied wildly depending on which species was clapping. Some whistled, some clicked, some made sounds that had no human equivalent. But the meaning was universal: agreement, celebration, hope. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, now Earth's ambassador to the Terran Accord, stood beside Sarah after the ceremony. They watched the representatives from different species mingling, forming friendships, planning collaborations. Do you remember when we first detected the Concordate vessel? Yuki asked. I was terrified. I thought we were about to meet our doom. Instead, we met our future, Sarah said. A future where humanity is not alone, where we have friends and partners across the stars. Do you think it will last? Yuki asked. Peace is fragile. It is, Sarah agreed. But we have built something stronger than peace. We have built mutual interest, shared purpose, and genuine respect. That is much harder to break than a simple treaty. On Earth, life continued much as it had before first contact. People went to work, raised families, pursued their dreams. But everything was different too. Children grew up knowing that humanity was part of a galactic community. Schools taught not just Earth history, but the histories of dozens of worlds. Young people looked at the stars and saw not empty void but neighbors, friends, potential. General Marcus Steele retired from active duty, but continued teaching at the Terran Defense Academy. He was old now, his hair completely gray, but his mind was as sharp as ever. He taught strategy to students who came from worlds he could barely pronounce. One of his favorite students was a young woman from Telos 4 named Kelvara. She was brilliant, innovative, and constantly challenging his assumptions. She reminded him of himself at her age. General, she asked one day after class, why did humanity prepare for hostile first contact? You could have assumed aliens would be friendly. Marcus smiled. We hoped for friends. We planned for enemies. That is the human way. We believe the best about people but prepare for the worst about circumstances. Is that wisdom or paranoia? Both, Marcus admitted. And sometimes the line between them is very thin. But I will tell you what my own teacher told me. Hope is not a strategy. You can hope for peace while preparing for war. The preparation does not prevent the peace. It ensures you will survive if peace fails. Kelvara nodded thoughtfully. I will remember that. Good, Marcus said. Because you are going to teach the next generation. That is how knowledge survives. We pass it down, student to teacher to student again, each generation learning from the mistakes of the last. 10 years after first contact, President Sarah Chen stood in her office in Geneva, looking out at the city. She was older now, her hair showing gray, her face lined with the weight of a decade of decisions. She had decided not to run for a third term. It was time for someone younger to lead. Her successor would inherit a galaxy very different from the one she had known. A galaxy where humanity was respected, where the Terran Accord kept peace not through domination but through mutual defense, where species worked together because they recognized the value of cooperation. Sarah thought back to that day when Ambassador Velthor had first arrived, offering protection Earth did not need from threats that did not exist. She thought about the moment when she had decided to laugh rather than capitulate, to stand firm rather than surrender. That decision had changed everything. A message came through on her secure terminal. It was from the Terran Defense Academy, another graduating class, the largest yet, representing 28 species. They wanted her to give the commencement address. Sarah smiled and accepted the invitation. She would tell them what she told every graduating class, that strength without wisdom is tyranny, that power without restraint is cruelty, and that the greatest victory is the one won without fighting. She would tell them about humanity's long, bloody history of warfare, and how that history had taught them to value peace. She would explain that preparing for war was not the same as wanting war, that deterrence was preferable to combat, that the best weapon was the one you never needed to use. Most importantly, she would remind them that they were not learning to be conquerors or enforcers. They were learning to be protectors of a new galactic order, one built on cooperation rather than domination, partnership rather than submission, freedom rather than control. The galaxy had changed. The Concordate's empire of fear had been replaced by the Terran Accord's alliance of choice. Species that had lived as subjects were now equals. Beings that had been told they were weak had learned they were strong. And at the center of it all was humanity, the species that had chuckled when offered protection and then taught the galaxy a better way. Sarah looked up at the stars, visible even in the afternoon sky through her office window. Somewhere out there on dozens of worlds, beings were living lives of freedom because Earth had stood firm. Students were learning to defend themselves. Species were cooperating as equals. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, misunderstandings, challenges. But it was better. So much better than the alternative. Madam President? Her assistant knocked on the door. Your car is ready. Sarah nodded. She had a meeting with the Terran Accord Security Council. Discussions about expanding the mutual defense network to include species from previously unexplored regions. The work never ended. Peace required constant attention, constant effort. But that was fine. Humanity had learned long ago that anything worth having required work. Freedom, peace, security. These were not gifts. They were achievements, hard-won and carefully maintained. Sarah took one last look at the stars, then turned and walked out of her office. There was work to do, a galaxy to help shape, a future to build, and for the first time in their history, humanity was not building that future alone.